Hey y'all, welcome to Down the Rabbit Hole. This is a pre-recorded episode because I'm not sure when I'm gonna post this, but give me time. My family is going through a loss right now, so but I'm just trying to get some recorded episodes in so I can post them when the time is right. Plus, keeping busy is something I just really need to do right now. Um, if you're new here, hit that like button, ring that bell for notifications. Also, please subscribe. Today we're gonna be continuing on with finishing up our Dollar Princess series, and we're going to be talking about Consuela Vanderbilt. We've talked about her a few times before, mentioning her in passing and all of that. But who is this Consuela Vanderbilt? Well, she is the daughter of William Keesum Vanderbilt, and she married Charles Spencer Churchill, who was the ninth Duke of Marlborough, and she's also a close relation to Jenny Jerome and Georgina Cavendish, I meant, who is a descendant of who is thus related to Jenny Jerome. So it's all connected somehow, and everything. But Consuela is the goddaughter of another dollar princess that I talked about on here, Consuela Yaniza, and she was an American socialite and member of the Vanderbilt. And at the time, the Vanderbilt was one of American royalties. I do plan on talking a little bit about some of the old money families, I guess you could say, in the U.S. So bear with me on that. But yeah. But Consuela's first marriage was to the ninth Duke of Marlborough. It became a well-known example of yet a beneficial yet loveless marriage, and which was very common during the Gilded Age and everything. And the Duke had obtained a large dowry though reported through the marriage, and reportedly just after the wedding that married her to save her ancestral home, Blenheim Palace. She was opposed to the marriage and even got tricked into marriage by her mom. Can you imagine your mom tricking you into marriage? That's just sad right there and everything. But anyway, oh yeah, it's game day by the way, War Eagle. But she would eventually become a popular and influenced duchess, and for their 25 years of marriage, they lived separately. And after an official separation was in 1906, the couple would divorce in 1929, which was followed by an annulment. And in 1926, her first marriage would give her two sons, John and Ivor, and she would go on to marry a wealthy French aviator, Jacques Balsam, and who continued his through charitable endeavors. And both Balsam and her lived in France prior to World War II and then moved to the States. I wonder if there's any descendants still going on today. Like I know there's Gloria Vanderbilt and all that, but I'm just very curious. But as stipulated in her will, she was buried next to her younger son, Lord Ivor, at St. Martin's Church. So, what about her early life? Well, we know she was born in New York City. She was the only daughter and eldest child of William Kyson Vanderbilt and Alva Esther Smith. Why does that name sound familiar? Because Alva was best friends with the last doll princess we just talked about, and even her names gave her best friend's namesake for crying out loud. So William was a New York railroad tycoon, and Alva was a Southerville and a budding suffragist and daughter of Murray Smurf Ford Smith. And Consuelo's Spanish name was in honor of her godmother, Consuelo Yanaza, who was a Cuban American socialite who had created a social stir in 1876 when she married the fortune hunting George Montague, Viscount Moundville, which was a union of old world aristocracy and new world money. So, Consuelo was largely dominated by her mom, and who was determined that her daughter would make a great match for great match like that for famous namesake. In her autobiography, Consuelo described her as that she would require her to wear a steel rod, which would run down her back and spine, and fasten her around her waist and shoulders and everything to improve her posture. and she was educated entirely at home by a governess and tutors. She learned foreign languages at an early age, and her mom whipped her into a riding crop for minor infractions. And as a teenager, she objected to clothing her mom had selected for her. Alva told her, "I did thinking you as you told." Getting some trauma responses, trauma here. But anyway, like her godmother, Consuela attracted numerous title-bearing suitors anxious to trade social positions for her, and her mom reportedly received the last five proposals of her at her hand, and Consuela was allowed to consider the proposal of just one of the men, Prince Francis Joseph of Battenberg, but she developed an instant aversion to him. None of the others, however, was good enough for Alva herself and the daughter of a cotton broker. Now, Consuelo was considered a great beauty, with a face compelling enough to cause the playwright Sir James Barrie, who was the author of what famous play? Peter Pan. Exactly. And everything. Now, let's talk briefly about her first marriage. So, determined to secure the highest ranking mate possible for her only daughter, a union emphasized on the premises of the Vanderbilt family, where Alva would intermediate between Consuela and the indebted Charles Spencer Churchill, who was the ninth Duke of Marlborough. The Chancellor of Blenheim Palace, and the matchmaker was a minor American turned English hostess, Lady Paget, and the wife who was the wife of Sir Arthur Paget, who was born as, can we guess it? Can we guess it? Mary Minnie Stevens, who was the very first of, well, the second of the Dollar Princesses that we talked about, and everything. And if you recall, Minnie was the daughter of Marietta Reed Stevens and Perrin Stevens, and who were successfully attained admittance to the exclusive New York Society of the Fable 400. Now, I do plan on talking about that a little bit later. But Lady Paget soon became sort of an international marital agent, introducing eligible American heiresses to the British noblemen. Consuelo had no interest in the Duke, being secretly engaged to Winthrop Rutherford, an American socialite who was 15 years her senior and everything. And her mom cajoled her, whittled her, begged her, and then ultimately ordered her to marry the Duke. And when Consuela made plans to elope, she was locked in a room, and as Alfred threatened to murder Rutherford, still she refused. It was only when her mom helps claimed to be serious and irritable that, undermined by Consuela's stubbornness, as she appeared at death's doors, and that the malleable girl finally just said yes. Surprisingly, though, her mom made a very astonishing recovery upon the supposed illness. And when the wedding took place, Consuelo stood at the altar weeping behind the veil. And the Duke, for allegedly gave up the woman, he moved back to England and collected 2,500,000 in railroad stocks as a marriage settlement. So, when she married him at the St. Thomas Church on November 6, 1895, they would have two sons, John Albert Edward William Spencer Churchill. That sounds like a mouthful to say. Who was the Marquess of Blandford, and a godson of a future King Edward VII, and Lord Ivor Charles Spencer Churchill in 1898. Now, the new Duchess was adored by the poor and less fortunate tenants of her husband's estate, whom she visited and whom she provided assistance, and she later became involved with other philanthropic projects who, without these, were infected by mother and children. And she was also a success with the royal and aristocracy. However, given the ill-fated match of the Duke and his wife, it was only a matter of time before their relationship was in name only. A few years into their marriage, she reconnected with Winthrop Rutherford and went on to spend 2 weeks in Paris with him. Soon after, she confessed to her husband that she loved Rutherford and wished to elope with him. The Duke's second wife, Gladys, went on to imply that his and Consuelo's second son was actually Rutherford's, and in 1900, With the Duke's reluctant permission, she went to London to discuss elopement with Rutherford, only for him to refuse her. In despair, the Duke set off to South Africa, where his cousin, Winston Churchill, was serving in the Second Boer War. And who do we know who Winston Churchill? That's right. Now, he was away for 6 months, returning in July 1900. Upon his return, Consuela confessed to having an affair with his cousin, Reginald Fellows. And she may also have had an affair with the artist Paul Caesar Hallow, who portrayed her in several sketches and everything. In the artist's work, it's believed that that Consuela had an affair with him between 1900 and 1901, and which continued after his return to Paris. And she visited him and sat him again. By this time, the Duke and the Duchess had completely stopped being intimate, and soon as Duke fell for Gladys, the eccentric American for a little money, but like Consuela, but dazzling to look at the end of considerable intellect. After Consuela's affair and planned elopement with Charles Van Temp Stewart, 7 more kids of Londonderry, the Marlboroughs separated in 1906. They would divorce in 1921 and their marriage would be annulled at the Duke's request with Consuela's assent on August 19, 1926. So, though largely she did so though largely embarked upon her way to facilitate an Anglican duke's desire to convert to Roman Catholic, the annulment, to the surprise of many, who's fully supported by Consuela's mom, who testified that the Vanderbilt-Marlborough marriage had been an act of unmistaken coercion, saying that I forced my daughter to marry the Duke and everything. Now, as one of the wealthiest and well-known dollar princesses of the late 19th century and early 20th centuries, the financial settlement at the center of the Union um, continues to attract commentary and reference more than a century after the wedding took place. The marriage settlement provided the Duke to receive 2,500,000 trust that would pay 100,000 per year, and she would and Consuela would also receive 100,000 per year. And the combined income of 200,000, more than double the income the Duke had enjoyed from his estates prior to the marriage. Now, Consuela and the Duke also acquired several large gifts from her father, William K. Vanderbilt, including a collateral London townhouse and reported sum of 100,000 in the cash to mark the Duke's safe return from South Africa. Consequently, the total amount given to Consuela, her first husband, and her children during her father's lifetime would be about 1,500,000 and possibly high as 300,000. So, what about the Duke's trust? Well, the Duke will receive 50,000 shares of Break Creek Railroad stock valued at $250,000, 100,000, which was to be placed in the trust with guaranteed interest and of at least 4% per year to be paid to the Duke in his lifetime. Then to Consuela if she survived him. Following the deaths of both Consuela and the Duke, the income of the trust would go to the next Duke of Marlborough, provided that he was a descendant of the ninth Duke. In the event that Consuela and the Duke not survived by a son or a male line descendant, the trust vest would, and the other descendants when the Duke had the power to appoint by deed of will. A 1944 court ruling that in the Chancery Division of the English High Court of the Court of Justice held that the death duties on the trust had to become payable by Consuela's son, the 10th Duke of Marlborough. Upon his death, the 9th Duke of Marlborough in 1934. Despite the fact that the income was still being paid by Consuela for the remainder of her lifetime, the duties was interest added to the period between the 9th Duke um, in April 12, 1946, were paid in 1946, which amounted to £175,000. Now, what about Consuela's trust? Well, part of her marriage settlement would take the form of a covenant made by William K. Vanderbilt to pay Consuela 100,000 annually for joint lifetimes. And this provided for the payment of the trustees and everything else. Now, following William K. Vanderbilt, the trust was to be treated as a debt against the estate. And the deed was transferred to Consuela's trustees. Now let's talk about her residence now. In the early years of their marriage, it was rumored that the inquiries were made about by her father and husband where the ancestral London townhouse, Duke of Marlborough House, could be recovered by the Crown Estate. Once it had become apparent that this could not be achieved, William K. paid the $380,000 a parcel in the land of Curzon Street, or a large townhouse, Sunderland House, was to be built for his daughter and son-in-law. A further 500,000 was reportedly spent at the construction and everything else. So, what about her father's estate and inheritance? Well, in the months prior to the death of Consuelo's father in August 1920, it was rumored that he had gifted him about $15,000, and the speculation was serious enough to result in a representative of the New York State Tax Office and everything. Let's talk about her second marriage and later life now. I'm gonna talk briefly about this. But Consuelo's second marriage happened July 4th, 1929. Oh my god. I can make a joke about that. I really need to laugh right now. But to Lieutenant Colonel Jacques Balsam, who was a record-breaking French balloon aircraft and hydroplane pilot, who was once with the Wright brothers and a textile manufacturing heir, and he had the younger brother of entering Balsam, an early lover of Coco Chanel, and their marriage lasted until Balsam's death in 1956 at the age of 88. After the end of her first marriage, she still maintained ties to her favorite Churchill relatives, particularly Winston, and he was a frequent visitor of the chateau in St. George Motel, which was a small commune near Drugs about 50 miles from Paris. Now, in the 1920s and 1930s. So, in records in Florida show that in 1932, Consuelo built a house in Malapan, just south of Palm Beach, which was in the 26,000 square feet mansion was designed by Maurice Faccio named Casa Alba in honor of her mom. Now, the property was sold in 1957. Many believe that in 1946, Churchill polished his famous Iron Curtain cloud as he visited Consuela on his way to Missouri to deliver an address to Westminster College. So, as Consuela Vanderbilt Balsam, she published her insight on her very candid autobiography and everything else. She would die in Southampton, Long Island, New York, December 6, 1964. She was buried near her younger son, Lord Albert, in the churchyard of St. Martin's, and everything else. Now, I want to talk, so, and the primary beneficiary of her personal estate, including residence, is her granddaughter, Lady Sarah. I want to talk briefly though about like her public service real quick because upon she was an heiress, true, but she was Auburn. Get your act together, please. Sorry, I'm watching the game. But the economic relief for the American relief, and during the interwar period, she and Renata Singer Polinak worked together in the construction of a 360 bed hospital provided and everything else in the suburb of Paris and everything else. But that is it for this episode. I'm gonna try to get some more recorded. I might not right now. This one was hard to get through, and I do apologize if it wasn't as liveful as the next one. But I'll see y'all next time.